Imagine standing on the highest point in the entire Western Hemisphere. The air is so thin it burns your lungs. The ground beneath your boots is bare rock. No ice, no snow, just raw, jagged stone scraping the sky at nearly 7,000 meters. Now imagine that within the very same country, you can descend to a salt-crusted depression more than 100 meters below sea level, where the wind howls across a wasteland of ancient fossils and nobody else for miles. Same country, same border. That's Argentina, and that's just the beginning. Most countries have one or two things that make them geographically interesting. A famous mountain, a notable river, maybe a peculiar climate. Argentina doesn't play by those rules. It stacks extreme upon extreme, contradiction upon contradiction, until the whole thing stops making sense and then somehow makes perfect sense. Let's start at the top. Mount Aconcagua rises 6,960 meters in the Mendoza province, making it the highest mountain outside of Asia. Not in South America, not in the Western Hemisphere, outside of Asia, full stop. It exists because the Nazca tectonic plate is being violently shoved beneath the South American plate. A geological collision so powerful that it keeps forcing the Andes skyward like a slow-motion explosion. What makes Aconcagua particularly strange, though, is what it doesn't look like. You'd expect a mountain of that height to be buried in ice and snow, like some Himalayan giant. But Aconcagua sits in one of the drier parts of the central Andes. Its upper reaches are surprisingly bare, rocky, exposed, almost lunar. Thousands of climbers attempt it every year, drawn by the prestige of standing at the absolute physical ceiling of two hemispheres simultaneously. Then there's the other end. Laguna del Carbon sits in the Santa Cruz province, tucked inside a geological feature called an endorheic basin, a closed drainage system where water flows in but has absolutely nowhere to go. No river carries it to the sea. Evaporation is the only exit. Over millions of years, that process left behind a hypersaline lake sitting 105 meters below sea level. It is the lowest point in both the western and southern hemispheres. The landscape around it is almost aggressively hostile. Salt flats baking in the wind, dinosaur fossils half buried in the earth, and a silence so complete it feels geological, from the highest peak in the Americas to the deepest depression in the Americas. One country, one extraordinary vertical range. Now go south, far south. Ushuaia is not just the southernmost city in Argentina, it is the southernmost city on Earth. Wedged between the jagged peaks of the Andes and the icy waters of the Beagle Channel, it sits at the literal bottom edge of the habitable world. For a long time, its extreme isolation made it perfect for one thing: punishment. In the early 20th century, the Argentine government used it as a remote penal colony, a place so far from everything that escape was geographically impossible. Today, that same isolation has become its greatest asset. Ushuaia is now the primary staging ground for expeditions crossing the Drake Passage to Antarctica, one of the most treacherous stretches of ocean on the planet. Scientists, researchers, and adventurers from around the world funnel through this small city before plunging into the white unknown. It is, by any reasonable definition, the edge of the world, and it has somehow become a thriving, functioning town. Head north from there, and you'll find something that defies a different kind of logic. Most of the world's glaciers are retreating. Climate change is shrinking them year by year, decade by decade, and most scientists don't expect that trend to reverse. For a long time, Perito Moreno Glacier in Argentine Patagonia was the rare exception. A glacier in dynamic equilibrium, advancing at roughly the same rate it was losing ice. It was celebrated as an anomaly, proof that at least one massive body of ice was holding its own against a warming world. That story has changed. Since 2022, Perito Moreno has begun retreating.
But Argentina's geography isn't just about extremes of nature. Some of its strangest features are deeply, unmistakably human. Take the fact that Argentina is named after a complete misunderstanding. When Spanish explorers arrived in the early 16th century, they heard indigenous legends about the Sierra de la Plata, a mythical mountain range made entirely of silver. Believing the vast river estuary they'd discovered must lead directly to those riches, they named it the Rio de la Plata, the River of Silver. The surrounding territory eventually took the name Argentina, derived from argentum, the Latin word for silver. There was no silver mountain. The legend was fiction, and the cruel geographic irony is that the actual silver wealth of the continent was concentrated in Bolivia and Peru, Argentina's neighbors. Argentina itself yielded very little of the precious metal. The name stuck anyway, a permanent monument to colonial wishful thinking etched permanently onto the map of the world. Deep in the northwest of the country, the geology tells yet another story, one about the limits of empire. The Inca Empire was the largest pre-Columbian civilization in the Americas, and its reach extended further into Argentina than most people realize. Using the Andes as a highway, the Incas pushed south through what is now northwestern Argentina, establishing agricultural outposts, trade routes, and high-altitude ceremonial shrines. On Mount Lulay-Laco, remarkably well-preserved mummies were evidence of how seriously the Incas treated their southernmost territories, but the expansion stopped in the Mendoza province. Not because of fierce resistance from local peoples, not because of military defeat. The Incas were stopped by geography itself, the increasingly arid climate and the vast windswept harshness of the Patagonian steppe. Even the most sophisticated empire in the pre-Columbian world couldn't conquer landscape.
Between 1860 and 1960, Argentina absorbed one of the largest waves of European immigration in history. The government actively encouraged it, operating under the philosophy that to govern is to populate. Millions arrived, Italians and Spaniards primarily, but also Germans, French, Polish, and Eastern Europeans, flooding into the fertile pampas and the coastal cities. Today, over 60% of the Argentine population claims some degree of Italian ancestry. That's ultimately what makes it unlike anywhere else. Most countries fit into a recognizable template. Argentina refuses to. It is simultaneously the highest and the lowest, the southernmost and one of the most European, home to a glacier that was defying climate change until recently, and a city that exists at the very edge of the habitable Earth. It was named after silver that didn't exist, partially colonized by an empire stopped by weather, and home to a Welsh community that somehow outlasted the odds. The geography of Argentina doesn't just describe a place. It tells a story about extremity itself, about what happens when a country spans so much space, so many climates, so many histories, that it stops being one thing and becomes something more like a continent pretending to be a country. And there is genuinely nowhere else on Earth quite like it.